This is part 2 of my video on DW drums and Rogers drums. The reason why I'm doing a video on these two particular drum sets is because they are currently the two drum sets that I use for everything. And I find that the Rogers does a great job with everything, as well as the DW. Configurations are a little bit different, and I thought there were some similarities and some differences between the way that they're made, and it's interesting to see, 50 years after the Rogers drums were made, how is a modern company like DW doing theirs. So I want to have a look at the Swivomatic bass drum pedal by Rogers with functions and features that other bass drum pedals don't have, and I'll show you how to set that up, as well as the Big R Dynasonic snare drum that has functions and features that others don't have, and I'll show you how to set that up. The Big R is a bit later in production than the script badge drums that the rest of the drum set is. Just before we get started looking inside these two floor toms, I just wanted to mention that this script badge Rogers drum set from Dayton, Ohio doesn't have the original wrap on it. The DW kit is all original, came from the factory, all the pieces matching, including the snare with the champagne glass finish on it, which is a wrap also. So let's have a look inside these drums. Now we're going to have a look at this Rogers vintage 16-inch floor tom and this DW 14-inch floor tom. These drums are made from maple wood, but obviously at a glance they look very different. And that's because one of them is painted gray. The Rogers here obviously is painted gray, and the DW on the right is clear wood. It feels like it might have a bit of either a wax or some kind of lacquer rubbed onto it. So the Rogers is painted flat gray. It's got the tone control muffler on the inside. I use these. I think they're great. Instead of using moon gel or some kind of ring to dampen the sound when you need it, I just adjust that to the head a little bit and maybe just take a little bit of the overtones out when I want to. You can also see that the DW has a reinforcement ring by the bearing edge, as well as the Rogers has a reinforcement ring. It's obvious that the Rogers is quite a bit thicker and bulkier, I guess taller and wider than the DW, which is more slender looking. I find it's not that easy to get a clear shot of the bearing edges. In photography, they always look a little different than they do to the eye. You'll notice that there's a bit of yellow adhesive that's still left just between where the wrap ends and where the bearing edge is. And that's a very, very thin bit of glue that was left over. I don't know if it's the original glue or it happened when it was, was put on there when the wrap was redone. But it's very, very thin and it's not sticky or anything, so I haven't done anything with it, I just left it. But in case you're wondering what that yellow is. Let's have a look inside this Rogers drum. This is what my voice sounds like outside the drum, and this is what it sounds like inside the drum. Inside the drum we find this paper tag, holiday model made in USA by Rogers, established in 1849, Dayton, Ohio. Going to have a look at the screws, washers. Those are the backing plates behind the floor tom legs. Reinforcement rings. Here's the tone control mechanism. And we'll have a look inside the DW floor tom. Again, reinforcement rings. There's the inside of the air vent, and this is what it sounds like inside the DW. And we've got screws and washers holding the hardware on, C-sharp, and the serial number, and the date. There are basically two steps to attaching the bass drum pedal to the bass drum. The first one is to take this plate and slide this part of the plate underneath the hoop with these loose plates on top of the hoop. Once that's in place, tighten down these screws. Those screws put a little pressure on these two plates on top of the hoop, and that clamps it on there. Next, bring the bass drum pedal to it, slide it on there, make sure it's locked in, which it is, and then tighten this bolt, and it locks the two of them together. To remove the bass drum pedal, just undo this bolt again, and then just slide the pedal away. And this clamp stays on the hoop until the next time. One of the other features that this Rogers Swivomatic bass drum pedal has that other bass drum pedals don't have is the ability to change the angle of the foot pedal to the bass drum. There's a bolt you can loosen just underneath the footboard, and it allows you to swivel the pedal. You can adjust this in either direction. It seems like one of the ideas behind this was that if you wanted your bass drum to face the front of a stage, that might mean that you would sit a little bit sideways to your bass drum to accommodate the angle of your leg and your foot. So with this adjustment, that means your bass drum could be straight on to your audience, but you could also face the audience as well by moving this to accommodate your foot. One of the things I love about these vintage Rogers drums is the fact that the bass drum has these older style tension rods, the T-rods, that you can adjust on the fly. So if you go to do a gig or something, a session, and you're setting up, checking the tuning, sometimes the bass drum might not sound right for the room or for the miking, or the temperature and humidity has changed, and you just want to tune your bass drum quick. You don't have to fumble for a key. You just adjust these to where you want it, and you're good to go. So there's the script badge from the 60s, and this is the big R. I find that there's a tonal quality to this snare drum that a lot of other snare drums just don't have. The moment I heard this one and I played it, I knew I had to have it. This snare drum came with a set of instructions. It says important instructions, and it shows you the throw off, and it's got instructions on the back about what to do. The Dynasonic snare drum has a snare bridge underneath, under the res head. This is unlike any other snare drum. That's why the instruction tag is there, because you kind of need to know a little bit about what you're trying to do. You can snap the snares on with your typical switch on the side here, but then you have another adjustment available. And this bridge secures the snare onto the head evenly from one side right to the other. And then you can adjust the tension of the whole bridge against the res head. And within the bridge, you can adjust the tension of the snappy wires themselves. So it's kind of like a two-part system. This one also has an internal tone control muffler, and I like that because I like my snare to sound
a little bit on the dry side. But the great thing about that is this one doesn't rattle or buzz or anything. And if I disengage it from the batter head, there's no problem. It just sounds open. And that's it.